Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine18. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. I am here with AVR to Lisa Papez and her tag called Tarot FAQ, Tarot Frequently Asked Questions. I love tags like this, where we get to learn about other folks' tarot practices. I haven't looked at the questions too hard ahead of time, but I did notice that the list of questions has 4 sections, which are deck preferences, buying and backing decks, reading style, and reading for clients. And since I don't read for clients, I am not going to do that section. So I'm just going to leave those questions off. I will put them in the description box below in case you also want to VR to this tag and you are a reader by profession. So I will leave those there, but I only read for friends and for myself. So most of those questions aren't going to be applicable to me anyway. I'll also link Lisa's original video below. And I'm going to try to kind of answer these questions in like a rapid fire kind of way. I can really ramble, and so I want to try to keep this one not too long. So, deck preferences. What are your thoughts on illustrated minors versus pips? I like both. I am at a point I would say that I like both equally. I like to read Marseille decks. I like to read pip decks that are not Marseille but are pip, and I also like to read Smith-Waite informed decks as well. Question number 2, how do you feel about keywords on decks? I feel strongly averse to keywords on decks. I don't like it. On an oracle deck, yes. On tarot, absolutely not. I only have a few that have keywords, and they're decks that I have found ways to love in spite of the keywords, but I really wish the keywords weren't there. And I only have a very few. So Urban Tarot, Next World, and The Majestic Earth are the only ones that come to mind off the top of my head that have keywords. There are decks that I have not bought because of the keywords. Don't like. Number 3, how do you feel about borders? I like bordered or borderless, honestly. As long as the borders are not this wide and aren't that big, I can usually be happy with borders, especially if the borders are, incorporated into the artwork as opposed to just kind of there. I do like a nice border. I also like borderless. So it's not, I wouldn't say that I actually have a preference either way, though really obtrusive borders that kind of take up a lot of space are not my preference. Number 4, what makes you decide to modify a deck? I saw Amy at Strength Reversed answer this and talk about having kind of fear and laziness around modifying a deck, and I totally am the same. I have modified very few decks, and when I have, it's mostly been edging with Sharpies. If I think a deck will take the Sharpie well and it won't be affecting the imagery, like if a deck has a black border, I know that a black edging will be good, and I won't make any mistakes, then I might modify a deck. I've only trimmed in a very few select circumstances. One of them being one where a deck was damaged around the edges, so really, I'm not inclined towards chopping borders off and things like that. I'm just not very good at it and don't want to make a mess. So, damaging a deck around the edges, that will make me trim it. Number 5, what kind of cardstock is your favorite? Thick and either matte or linen finish is my preference. I know that this is entirely subjective, but I don't like really glossy. I don't like really sticky. I don't like the kinds that really clump together a lot. I do have some decks that are glossy that I'm totally fine with, but as a rule, I would prefer matte, and I like cardstock to be thick or at least feel very sturdy. The second section is buying and backing decks. So the first question there is, where do you go to look for new decks you may want to buy? They seem to find me without me really trying. I don't need to actively go looking for decks. I found enough on my own, so I don't go looking too much. I mean, except I watch other people's YouTube videos, of course, and I see new decks there. I follow other folks on Instagram where I'm Aquamarine18 as well, and I see decks there, but I don't really have to go hunting for them. What has been your best and worst Kickstarter slash crowdfunding experience? Well, I'll just say Kickstarter because the only context in which I have ever done any deck-related crowdfunding has been on Kickstarter. I've mostly had very good luck with Kickstarters and backed campaigns that went reasonably smoothly. Inevitably there's delays, but I really don't mind delays with a Kickstarter. I kind of expect them. Things just take longer than people expect, and that's okay. I would say in terms of best experiences, James R. Eads runs a really good Kickstarter. He always gets me for extras, but I've backed his Open Portal playing cards. I've backed his Green Glyphs, Lenormand, and the quality is just always excellent. He's a great communicator. He takes feedback into account from backers. He's really transparent about things. I've never ever been concerned. I will back James R. Eads' projects forever. I've never ever had a problem or a worry. Things always come out, exceeding my expectations, and my expectations for his work are quite high based on his track record. So I'll say James R. Eads is a best Kickstarter experience. Worst Kickstarter experience, Commonplace Tarot for me was the worst one, and it wasn't horrifying. I did say I have had good luck with Kickstarters. I haven't had any I know people who've backed Kickstarters who've just never gotten anything. Or have gotten something really, really damaged and couldn't get it replaced. I've never had anything like that happen. Commonplace Tarot Kickstarter, though, was quite delayed, which again is fine, but it was quite delayed with very little to no communication about those delays, so that was really frustrating. And then when the deck came, it had massive, massive, massive borders to the point that I would call it a mini deck. So after all of the clueless waiting, I wasn't happy with the final thing. And I really love the artwork, so that was really disappointing. Number 3, how do you decide what decks you want to buy or back? Want to buy and want to back are totally different considerations for me. Because, buying a deck that's already in the world, you can see walkthroughs, you can see reviews, you can see people talk about, well, this is, bend the card and say, well, this is what the card stock looks like. I look for that. You can find out a little bit about what a guidebook is like when a deck is already out there. So reviews and walkthroughs are things that I take into account. Obviously a walkthrough is not going to make me like or dislike artwork. That's just down to personal preference. But I do look to walkthroughs and reviews for things like the physical quality and specs of a deck, what the guidebook is like, whether the packaging is sturdy, things like that do impact what I want to buy. So does the creator. If I've had a deck by a creator before and they come out with another one, there's a good chance I might get it if I like the first deck. And other than that, it's just, does the artwork speak to me? Is it a deck that calls out to me? Do I maybe feel like it's filling a niche in my collection? It's not really like anything else I have? Those all contribute to wanting to buy a deck. Deciding what deck to back, I will look at the price, obviously. That goes for buying too, but I'll look at the price and look at the shipping and look at the way the shipping has been priced, because usually these things are international for me. So that can make a big difference. If the shipping costs more than the deck, then that's a no. For backing, I will look at a creator's previous track record again, someone like James R. Eads. It's take my money. I know that the campaign will go well. So that plays into it. I'll look at, thanks to Casper at The Boy Diviner for this tip, if somebody's run other Kickstarters before, I'll look at their old Kickstarters and what the comments were. If somebody theoretically, there's a bunch of comments from people saying they didn't get their stuff, that's a flag for sure. And in terms of backing decks, I do love, and I know Kickstarter constrains people on this a little bit, I love when there's some environmental component, whether it's just environmentally friendly paper and packaging, or whether it's, some small amount going towards, a charitable cause that I care about or an environmental cause that I care about. That is something that I will take into account that will make me potentially more likely to back a deck. Just a deck that is maybe unlike other things that I have. And there have been the occasional Kickstarter that I really kick myself for missing. I haven't done too many. I feel like I've probably backed about 12 or 15 decks, maybe even less than that actually, maybe 10 decks in my life. But for the most part, I've had good experiences, so that's nice. How much is too much to spend on a deck is the next question. I just spent more on a deck than I thought that I would. And I will be having a walkthrough of this deck when I get it. I treated myself to a deck that I've wanted for a very, very long time, and that's the Gaian Tarot. And I got the limited edition Gaian Tarot from Joanna Pell Colbert directly. So that's on its way to me now. I've wanted the Gaian Tarot for so long. I love the imagery, but I've really been on the lookout for the Llewellyn version of the deck as opposed to the current mass market Schiffer version, because the Schiffer cardstock, I have decks that have that cardstock and I don't use them because for me they don't shuffle all that well. They loosen up over time, but like it's just not, it's almost a deal breaker at this point. So I'd been keeping an eye out for this Llewellyn cardstock Gaian, but it's out of print, and they pop up on eBay occasionally, but they'll be like $250. And I'm like, well, that's, for a secondhand deck, like that's a lot. The most I've ever spent is like 100 before. But then Liz at West Star Tarot, Liz made me do it, showed in another tag her limited edition Gaian Tarot, which comes on a cardstock that is more like the Llewellyn. And I found out that there was a handful of these new decks, limited edition, that come with a pouch and a guidebook as well, that were still available from the artist. And they were $147 US, and I bought one. So I kind of like really wobbled back and forth on whether or not I thought $147 was reasonable, but it came down to the fact that whenever I've seen a Llewellyn deck or Llewellyn version of the Gaian on eBay, it's been like more than that. So I convinced myself that it was a great deal and went for it. So $147 is now the record for what I've spent on the deck, US. And how much is too much? I don't know. I mean, there was a time I would have said I never would have spent $147, and then I did, so I don't know. Question number 5. Do you have any deal breaker cards or cards that have to feel right to you to pull the trigger on a deck? And what are they? I know people have particular cards that they look at first, and I do have that. I look at the Moon card. I think of the Moon card as a positive card, and it's one that other people seem to sometimes think of as a negative one. So if a Moon card is portrayed in a negative way, that would be a problem for me. I can't think of any decks off the top of my head where that's the case, but like a Moon card can break it for me for sure. I look at the Three of Swords because I don't love the Three Swords impaling a heart. It's not a deal breaker, but it's not a preference. And then overall, at this point, deal breaker cards, I would say in a deck full of people, if every single card is like hetero representation, that's a deal breaker. That's not a specific card, but if a deck doesn't feel inclusive in some way, to me, that's going to be a deal breaker as well. At this point, for decks that feature people, obviously not all do. So those are things that I look at. Yeah. Reading style, and there's 5 questions, and this is the last 5 questions that I'm going to do. Reading style, do you have a daily tarot practice? If not, when do you read for yourself? I don't have a daily tarot practice. I'm aspiring to it, and it will be part of my New Year's resolutions. I would say that I do something tarot related every day, but that's not necessarily reading for myself every day. I don't have a morning daily draw or anything like that. I have a daily-ish draw. But I will, I'm usually reading a tarot book or, looking at something. So, or thinking about making a video, like tarot comes up daily, but just not as a daily practice per se. I do always read for myself at new and full moons. And it's a bit of a ritual for me, and there's other things that I do at those times as well. But a reading is always part of that. I read for myself on the points of the wheel of the year, so like solstices and equinoxes. I read for myself. I read for myself on my birthday. I read for myself usually around New Year's. So there's all kinds of times. I'm reading fairly frequently, but not daily. What is your go-to shuffle style? I overhand shuffle. I do not riffle unless I am playing cribbage or poker or something of the sort. I just overhand. I don't really like riffling tarot, and I don't have a good reason for that. Like, it's not like I'm opposed to other people doing it. Something about it doesn't feel smooth to me, with the way that I then cut the deck. Overhand just feels so much more natural, so that's what I do. Number 3, how do you choose which deck you're going to work with? Mostly gut. I look at the decks, and now I have my decks all on a shelf so I can see them all at once. And one will just kind of call to me, and that's what I'll go for. I definitely have certain decks that I go to more for particular seasons. I made a video about fall decks recently, and I have a handful of decks that are very much like wintry feeling to me. There are a couple of decks that, I'll use on particular... I use the same deck for my birthday every year, and that's just, I don't know if it's become a superstition or what, but, that's a thing. But mostly, it's just what I feel like. I have at times done the, I'm going to work with this deck for a month, or I'm going to work with this deck for 2 weeks, kind of thing, and I like that, but it's not something I do most of the time. Number 4, do you purchase professional readings for yourself? Yes, absolutely. Not as much as I would like. I should purchase more professional readings for myself, but I do, absolutely. And I'm a fan of, I will just say, this is not a question. This is a bonus question B. When I purchase professional readings for myself, I really like written readings. So whether that's like typed or with a photo of the cards or something like that, or like a snail mail handwritten, I really like to have a written reading as opposed to like a video. It's just personal preference. I'm glad that all of those options exist. But if I'm not going to have a reading in person, then I really like a written one. And the last question that I'm going to read, because I'm skipping the client questions, do you use tarot for anything other than divination? Absolutely. I work with tarot for meditation, particularly for pathworking meditation. I will work with tarot for kind of manifestation type work, putting something out as a vision to invite something into my life, for sure, in conjunction with maybe some spell work or something like that. I use tarot for, what do I use tarot for? Maybe like goal setting would be a good way to put that. I might pick out a card that represents something that I want to do and journal a bit about that. I use tarot for personal exploration and journaling prompts, and I don't know that qualifies as divination. I don't really think of that as divination, right? Reading for to bring things out of myself. I also use tarot with cognitive behavioral therapy based exercises for anxiety. When I was in counseling, I got some DIY CBT exercises and work and books related to that. And I find that they pair really well with tarot. So I've also been working with tarot for that. So those are some extra things that I work for tarot with. Work with tarot for, rather. I don't know what Okay, my rapid fire questions were not so rapid fire, but there we are. That is tarot frequently asked questions VR to Lisa Papez, skipping the questions about reading for clients because that's not a thing that I do right now. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to watching others' answers, and I've enjoyed watching others' VRs that I've seen so far. Have a good one. Bye.